Woohoo! Yeah, EQ. Let's talk about EQ, one of my favorite effects on here. My name is Playgue, and we are talking about every single effect on this device, and that includes the EQ. The EQ is available on everything, and it is used in every single track that you see. And multiple times too. In fact, of all the tracks that I perform and know, I did a search for the EQs, and there's 119 EQs that I use for just like around 50 tracks. Yeah, that's a lot of EQs. So we're going to talk about probably the most important effect on the loop station, the EQ, and what it all means and does. So we have low, mid, high, and level for the parameters. Ranges in which these affect are not equal. So in what they boost and they cut, they are not equal in range. The range for the lows is 0 to 450 hertz. The low mids are 200 to 1,500 hertz. The high mids is 1,000 to 10,000 hertz, or 1 to 10 kilohertz. Highs are between 3,000 and 22,000 hertz, or 3 to 22 kilohertz. And then the level ranges from negative 20 decibels to plus 20 decibels. Now, what the EQ is essentially doing is taking a specific band range. So you have sound, and they either have high pitches and low pitches, and they range within their frequency of how bright or dark a sound is. And what the EQ does is it boosts or cuts or reduces a certain amount in a given frequency range. So that's what all the ranges I was talking about. And then you can boost the entire thing by the levels here. To put all this stuff in perspective, I will have a super helpful chart that I will show you at the end of this video that will break down everything that I just said in this tutorial into one helpful little chart that I made. But let's talk about uses for the EQ. So I came up with 5 uses, including a 6th bonus use for your EQs. So these are kind of the 5 main EQs to keep in mind when using this device. The first EQ that you're going to have is going to be your default EQ. I've been using, for every single one of these episodes or videos, I've been using my default EQ, which for me is +6 on the lows, -10 on the low mids. High mids is +2, highs is +8, and levels is +4. Now this is tuned to my instrument, my voice, but your default can be whatever that you use the most of. And there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize that. Like Ben Beat, for example, has their levels up much higher than mine because of their microphone that they use, which is also going to play a factor in what you have. Every looper has their own EQ that is tuned to what they are. This is just going to require you kind of playing around with your voice, your different sounds, your instrument, hearing the best ways to do things and what sounds the best to you and your instrument. And I will say you might be adjusting this even in the future. Like I have changed my low mids just recently, and I've been using this device for almost 2 years now. It may change, and your voice and your instrument may change, and your preferences may change. But the second EQ that you're going to want to have, I have mine on input effects C, is going to be your hi-hat EQ. So this one is going to be a -20 dB, low mids -20, high mids is -15, highs is +20, and your level is going to be +10. Again, it's going to depend on your mic for the levels and also the mixing. Sometimes I'll add more levels if the hi-hats aren't coming through, or I'll even make them a little bit more quiet. But most of the time I'm doing a +10 for the levels on the hi-hats. That will turn your hi-hats into sounding like this, which is using this EQ, to this. So very, very useful to be able to hone in your hi-hats with this awesome EQ. So this is something that I've always done. I haven't seen any other loopers do this, although I'm sure they do. Most of the time they'll use like a filter or something like that. But personally, I like using an EQ for my hi-hats. The third type of EQ that you're going to want to use is for your vocals. So I don't use this EQ for my vocals sometimes. A lot of times it works, but if I'm doing any type of singing or vocaling like harmonies or anything like that, I may change, because this is for my beatboxing, this EQ that I'm using. My vocal EQ I keep on A, which is going to be +4 for the lows, +3 for low mid, +3 for high mid, +8 for highs, and -4 for the levels. It just makes my vocals sound better, because I'm not the best singer in the world for sure, but I still want to be able to sound at least reasonable. So this is the EQ that I use for any type of vocal work that I'm doing. The fourth type of EQ I don't have, because I can only have 3 EQs here. So we're going to talk about another EQ, which is specific sounds. So your specific sound EQ is going to be your EQ for very specific things. So for example, if you have a granular delay sound that you're trying to hone in, you can have a specific EQ for that. Like for example, on Move with A, I have an EQ specifically for the granular delay. And my EQ is +5 for lows, +7 for low mids, +17 for high mids, +15 for highs, and the level is just 0. And it allows for the sound to really come out. Move your body with it like... Woo! Say what? And there's lots and lots of examples of mixing an EQ specifically for a certain sound that you're trying to hit. The fifth type of EQ is going to be a targeted boost or a cut. What this is essentially going to be doing is it's going to, if you need a certain frequency range to be boosted or cut, you're going to use a targeted cut. So you're going to set up your EQ for mostly is going to be zeros, but let's say you wanted the levels to be boosted for something, you can put a +10 on that specific track. And you can also control the levels via the knob, so you can even use this as a volume control for whatever tracks are on the track effects. So when I do blindfold, for example, to make this bass, that last note there, it actually is very difficult for this to actually like capture, because it's so low that I'm doing it. So what I do is I have my guitar to bass, I have this on filter, and then I have my targeted EQ here to specifically boost my lows. So I have a +7 and +5 there, and everything else is 0. So I'm able to actually capture that. So I do my first 2 notes, and then on the third note, I'll turn the EQ on to capture that. And that's it. Those are the 5 main EQs. Or so I thought when I originally wrote this script. Over time, I have found another EQ that is very helpful. I will not do this for every track that I make, but for some tracks, I will actually do this, and that is for kicks. You can do a EQ for a kick as well that really makes kicks more punchy. And for me, the more punchy kicks that I do, I have the lows on +10 to 12. It depends on the mix. I have the low mids on -10. The high mids I have on +1. And the highs I have on +5. And the level will really depend, but usually I'll put it on +15 to +20. Depending on where, which seems really loud, but I also pair that with a dynamics, which then will reduce the sound of the loudness of that, and really it really captures the essence of the kick really well. Again, it takes up another EQ slot, and we only have 3 of them on the MK1, so it makes it a little more specific to whatever track I'm doing, but that's a little bonus EQ for you. So I wanted to take all this information I just gave you and move it into one of my patented helpful little charts. And so here we go. Here is the EQ chart. This will hopefully help you really hone in and figure out what your EQs are. Keep in mind that all of these can be adjusted for your instrument and what your needs are. That's why when you see a lot of loop station tutorials, you'll see loopers not really talk about EQ too much, because it's really specific to you and your instrument. With that said, let's talk about how to really play around with the EQ. So the first piece of advice I can give you is don't get locked into a specific EQ. Explore how your EQ can change your sounds and the feeling of the track. And don't be afraid to change your EQ mid-track too. Like I do that quite frequently, where I'll boost my lows like +2 more. Another thing you can do is pairing EQ up with a dynamics. So dynamics pairs really, really well with a EQ. Typically what I'll do is I'll have a +4 live compression, and this allows for the sound to really, really come out. Another thing to keep in mind is you want to think about boosting and cutting equally. What I mean by that is you want to boosting a certain band can take away from other bands. Like for example, if you raise the highs, it'll actually reduce the lows. When you're cutting or boosting, and just keep the boosting part in mind, it will reduce the sounds of your others through compression and other various reasons. Keep that in mind when boosting. Also keep in mind that when you're cutting, it'll boost other sounds. So the reason why we have our low mids down so low is because it allows the lows to actually cut through the mix a lot better. And we want more lows in a lot of our sounds and tracks that we're doing. So we have usually a negative number for our low mids, so then we can have the lows stand out that much more. If you want to make something more prominent, you can absolutely boost it up to a much higher level, or you can cut what's around it, and that will also allow that to be a lot more prominent as well. Another tip I can give you is to listen to several tracks, like record tracks on here, or allow it to play through your speakers through this thing as a mixer, and adjust the EQ, like turn up the lows, turn down the lows, and really just listen to what changes. And it's a really good way to train your ear to know when you're listening to something, you're like, oh, this feels like it's missing like something. You can listen for the frequency range, and you can train your ear into really understanding like, oh, this is missing some high mids. I should increase my high mids a little bit. Or this feels a little too harsh. Well, it feels harsh because the highs are too up. So just having tracks, just listening to songs and adjusting those can really help train your ear into figuring out, okay, what do I need to adjust here? But the ultimate tip, this is the ultimate tip for EQing and mixing. Do what sounds good. That is the advice that I have gathered from the years I've been doing music. No rules. It's all art. What we're making is just what's in your brain onto this device. This is your brain. Don't let anyone tell you that things need to be a certain way or have to be in a specific pattern or whatever. Make what you want to make. And that also goes with your EQ. That's what really matters, because you're going to be listening to your music more than anyone else on the planet. Play around and just do what sounds good to you. Do your best. That's all I could ask of you. Just have fun. That's it. With all that said, we're going to go ahead and listen to a track here. I use several different EQs in this, and I'm swapping back and forth. I'm also changing EQs mid-track, so let's explore what we can do with some EQs.
Yo.